recently I did a thing with an architectural engineering firm. They have great architects, some of the best in the world working for them. And they take those people that are really technically strong, technically competent at what they do, and they make them the leader. Who trains them on the leadership skills? Because they're really good in sales, they're now the sales leader. And is it because you're very strong technically, are you really good at being a leader? And it's two different skills. It's completely different. And I think we overlook that in business over and over and over again. We pick the highest technical competency in their specific field, whatever they happen to be, radio announcers or podcasters or whatever they're doing, and they make you the leader of podcasters. Because you're very technically competent doesn't make you a leader.
Everyone, welcome to this episode of Thinking Christian. I'm Dr. James Spencer, and I'm joined by my co-host, Nate Giartano. I say it wrong every time. It's so sad. I don't know what my problem is. Anyway, we have a special guest here, Brock Simmons. I'm going to let Nate intro him. They are friends. They know each other. And so, Nate, go ahead and introduce Brock for us.
Yeah, I've been really blessed and fortunate to find Brock in my life through a men's group at my church the last year and a half or so, and serving with him at church. Just an amazing guy, but one of those people that when you leave conversation with him, you just always feel inspired or challenged to want to be better. And so we're really excited to have him on here about what he's done and what he is doing with his new venture, Always Present. So welcome, Brock.
Thank you.
Brock, man, just tell us a little bit about what you're doing. You talked a little bit in the pre-interview about your background, so maybe let's start there. Where are you coming from, and then maybe we'll talk about what you're headed to.
Yeah, well, that's great. Well, thank you. Thanks for being here. I'm blessed with
Absolutely
hanging out with you guys. So this is fun.
Yeah.
So my background's been in training, leadership development and training for the last 20 years. Started in Vancouver, Canada. Small little retailer, then grew and we expanded, and we were at, I think, 41 retail stores when I started, and we ended up at 1,405 locations in 4 countries, and we're doing over $1 billion in sales. And I headed up the learning and development part of that. So that was a big learning curve for me in my career. And then specifically in software and training people on how to be great leaders, which, as we all know, it's a tough one, right? and I think what I love to talk about is technical competency. It's a strange word, but somebody that is technically very good at what they do. And I love looking at plumbers. I don't know why I love plumbers, but if there's any plumbers out there, I love plumbers. They keep the world going. But if you're a really strong plumber, you get promoted to be the leader of plumbers. Mm-hmm. But it almost works against you. And I've seen it. I recently I did a thing with an architectural engineering firm. They have great architects, some of the best in the world working for them. And they take those people that are really technically strong, technically competent at what they do, and they make them the leader. Who trains them on the leadership skills? Because they're really good in sales, they're now the sales leader. And is it because you're very strong technically, are you really good at being a leader? And it's two different skills. It's completely different. And I think we overlook that in business over and over and over again. We pick the highest technical competency in their specific field, whatever they happen to be, radio announcers or podcasters or whatever they're doing, and they make you the leader of podcasters. Because you're very technically competent doesn't make you a leader. And so what I've been doing in my career over the last 21 years is training people what those skills are to be an effective leader. And unfortunately, I've ran across a lot of train wrecks, as we all have in our careers, right? We've all seen those people. You think, how did they become a leader? And the truth is, they were technically competent. They were very good. And they got promoted up because they were really good architects or really good at sales or really good at a plumber. They're the best plumber. And all of a sudden they're the leader of the plumbers. And it's unfortunately a kind of a train wreck over and over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely can be. I mean, I remember being promoted from an assistant dean where I was under, a couple of other people who were directing and leading the organization I was a part of, to a vice president, and having this, almost like little miniature mental crisis, just
Yeah.
saying, okay, yeah, I feel confident that I could do this, but I have no idea even where to start. And so I was at least blessed the organization was allowed me to get a executive trainer, executive leadership trainer for a year. And I worked with
Beautiful.
her, and she helped me clarify my values, helped me
Yes.
understand how to lead and operate a team, broke me of some of my bad habits, not all of them,
Yeah.
but some of them. There's only so much you can do in a year. But I think it was really one of those moments where exactly what you're talking about. I was actually pretty good at my job as an assistant dean,
Yeah.
and so I was
That's why you got promoted,
promoted,
right? That's
right? And
yeah.
and and then you're just sitting there in the VP chair. You're going, well, I don't understand what I'm.
or you do, and why don't these idiots that work for me just do
That's
it like
right.
I did? I just put my head down and got it done.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and it just doesn't work, does it?
No, it doesn't. I mean, I think that's one of the interesting things that she noted for me was that as an assistant dean, I could put my head down and work, and I was good at that, and I could get a lot of things done that way. As a leader, you don't run that way generally. Like it
Mm-hmm.
has
It
to be
actually it's
delegated, you have
interesting.
to be coaching, you have to be pushing.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
actually paradoxical that the more you're technically competent, it actually works against you in delegation or
yeah,
accountability. A lot of they're diametrically opposed.
yeah,
And so I like to say the dumber I get, the smarter my people get.
yeah,
And
yeah.
so we got to get this dumb thing going. And we're no, I'm technically really good. Hold on. And really honestly, the dopamine hit it's and the feel good drug, because we were so good at sales or the plumber or whatever, we get that dopamine hit returning because yeah, I fixed the job, I did it again, right? And it's like,
Right.
crap, oh, I
Yeah.
wasn't supposed to do that.
Yeah, leadership's almost a longer payoff. I mean, you
Yeah,
you
it
really
it really is. And,
yeah,
and part of the delegation is how do I look long term on developing my people, and not that immediate dopamine
right.
hit for fixing the problem immediately. And
Yeah.
unfortunately it's diametrically opposed.
Yeah.
How much are you able to intertwine ministry, like maybe behind the scenes when you're talking with people? I know it's not probably always, but I know you, and you're very much, heart driven in that way, and so you probably get entangled in these people's lives, and God's able to use you
Yeah.
to inspire, to encourage, lift them up. If you want to speak a little bit to that, that'd be great.
That's a great question, Nate. So what with in this new thing I'm doing right now, we break it into three different areas: is bronze, silver, and gold. And a bronze is all about filling up before you pour out. So it's personal leadership. If you don't lead yourself, how possibly can you lead other people? It's just
Mm-hmm.
it's bad math, right? And so the question is, how do you fill up before you pour out? And as you guys know with leadership, and I'm sure every listener here, leadership is it's exhausting. I don't know, you
Mm-hmm.
guys, like you spend hours and hours pouring into your people, and you think, how do I fill up? Because an empty cup you can't pour out.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is to people all the time: how do you fill up? And in personal leadership, we go through a significant talking about what are the processes of filling up, or processes. Sorry, but my Canadian comes up. So how do we actually fill up before we pour out, right? And that's really the trick. And I go back to Dr. Peter Attia. He talks about the four levers, and they're physical levers. I don't know if you guys are fans of Dr. Peter Attia, but he talks about levers, and the more you pull on the lever, the more response you get from it. And the four levers that I refer to in the bronze um, is taking those four levers very, very carefully, and looking at, and those are diet, exercise, mindfulness, and sleep. And that whole
Mindfulness.
mindfulness, yeah. And so diet, we understand, not, it's not a diet, it's your caloric intake. So diet, exercise, and mindfulness in there. And going back to your question, what is mindfulness? And I think that's for me, it's a great bridge into how do you really take care of who you are, mind, body, soul, spirit. How do we actually do that? And I've had some, it's actually covertly, you can't in a lot of in high tech and stuff like that. It's in this DEI world, you got to be very careful in what you say, but really in mindfulness, having those discussions one-on-one are very, very powerful. So that's how I've been able to bridge that. Super excited.
What is, you kind of referenced you're doing the new thing, but what is the new thing? It's still in the realm of training and development, I assume, training and
Yeah.
leadership development, but
yeah,
thanks, talk a
James.
little bit about it.
Yeah, so we have all these leaders. You're James. You started a plumbing company. Sorry, you look kind of like a plumber, so I'll give you that one. And so you started this plumbing company, and now you're promoted to be a leader of plumbers, or you're promoting some of your people. How do you actually train them? And being in training and development, we've all been to those 5-day training seminars, or 3 days. And day one, you kind of, you're excited and the trainer is really good. And then by day 2, you want to blow, your ears off. And by day 4, you're lost. And it just doesn't soak in.
Yeah.
So interesting. I lived in Israel in the 80s. I lived on a kibbutz. It's south of Beersheba, and it's about 250 miles south of Beersheba. And we brought water from the Sea of Galilee all the way down to this desert. And in talking to this Moshe, who was my boss, he was talking about how in 1948, when they first landed in Israel, they started to water the desert, and they literally took sprinklers and tried to water the desert, and it was, it just evaporated. Down the Negev, it's so dry. It's like Arizona. It's just dry. Nothing grows, right? So how do they water? So in 1965, they invented a technology called drip irrigation, which were small tubes of drip irrigation, and they would drop small droplets of water directly on the root of the plant. And what they found is they reduced the amount of water by 75% because they didn't have any evaporation. But the actual vegetables, we were growing cucumbers, the actual vegetables got 30% larger. So this process of drip irrigation, I take to training. Instead of going in with a fire hose, we got to do training. Let's train everybody on coaching, right? Take the fire hose, you fire hose the crowd. Well, we trained everybody. How come they're not coaching? Well, hold on. Let's take a look at the drip irrigation directly in the root of the plant, small amounts over a large period of time. Yeah. And that drip irrigation, what I've found, it just works. And small micro trainings over a large period of time. And James, you talked about it in your career, is taking a year, is really transforming. And we're not talking about information, it's transformation. How do I transform my behaviors so I lead differently? Yeah. And so this new thing that I'm doing, instead of doing an 8-hour class on how to be a great leader, I'm doing small virtual trainings, and they're micro trainings on leadership. Yeah. And I start off with bronze, silver, and gold. So bronze is small, 2 days a week for an hour and a half, little tiny micro trainings on how to transform yourself. So then you show up the best version, how you fill up so you can pour out all day long. And
I can't help but think when you're sharing that, we work a lot in discipleship, and we're trying to really, encourage churches to do discipleship. They're very much like in tandem, kind of like right next to each other. So there's so many similarities there. When I hear you describe that, I'm thinking about what we're trying to do with discipleship. So,
yeah. And it is, right. This fire hose, it would go into a church and yell at people for 4 hours, and they wonder why they don't change. Well, it's behavior change. I often think about playing a guitar. I don't know if any of your listeners play guitar, but if you were to take a guitar and play guitar for 8 hours straight, you just hurt your fingers. It doesn't work, right? It's transformational. How do we change potato? And it's this drip irrigation over a large period of time. How do we drip? Small micro trainings to transform the way we do business. And that's the key. So you have a young leader, you're in your business, James, a plumber, and he's technically one of the best plumbers you have. You're promoted to be a leader. How are you going to train to be a leader? And what I believe is small virtual micro trainings over a 3-month period, starting with bronze, helping him develop who he is on the inside so he can pour out. And then silver is all about team leadership, how he develops his team and grows his team. And then gold is organizational development and breaking those down. So then over a 3-month period, like you had, James, is that transformational drip irrigation over a period of time to transform his leadership or her leadership skills is really what it's about.
I've done a fair amount of consulting in higher education. And so it's not exactly the same as leadership training and leadership development. But one of the things that I've found is that well, the way I usually structure my consulting reports when I give them to a school, I try to give them some really easy wins. I try to give them those things that aren't going to cost them any money to do, and they can be implemented within, let's say, the next 30 days. Even if it seems fairly trivial, because there's something about that institutional momentum and the realization that knowing this is different than doing this.
Oh yeah.
Right. And so how do you pivot and get somebody to go from micro learning a concept or a principle to actually implementing that principle and having that sort of participatory effect, right? Where now they're not just, yeah, I agree with that principle, it's interesting, I like it, but now they're going, oh man, I just saw this principle work. How do you cultivate that?
Yeah. So that's a great question. I love that, James. So it's how do you actually do this? So what we do is we do small virtual classrooms,
Okay.
and only 8 to 10 people per class. So they're small, really intimate classes.
Yeah.
And it's okay. So for this here's behind the curtain, a little behind the curtain on a trainer dude. So I've been doing training for years. I send out these post training assessments.
Okay.
How good was I, and did you like the trainer? All the rest of this. It's interesting.
Yeah.
Was doing small micro trainings 9 times out of 10 across the board. I mean, it's almost. What were the best things you learned in the training? They come back and they say, I learned more from my colleagues, from the cohort I went through, than anything in the class. Is that crazy? So yeah, so I think all this wisdom that I have and all these years of experience, and they learn more from their colleagues. Isn't this crazy? And what I try to foster is they have their own chat room. So I have each classroom has their own chat and discussion. Every week they have homework, and then they meet with me for 1 hour, their mentor.
Okay.
And this dripping, and then they talk with each other, and they have to cope, and like, you can't cheat in your homework. What I do is, hold on, guys, cheat in your homework, talk to each other, let's share. And in the homework, they discuss, and that colleagues, it's again, we talked earlier about not what to do, why to do it. It's the how, and how is 75% of it. How do I apply this on my job? Like you were talking about, Jake, how do I actually implement this? And they can talk to other colleagues and other people going through this. Go, oh, that's how I can do it. Oh, that's how I hold Fred accountable to show up on time, or whatever you're dealing with, right? I play softball with Fred. He's my best buddy, and now I'm his boss. Yeah. Right. And I got to get Fred to show up on time. And he goes, forget it, dude. I'm not doing it. Oh, hold on. How do you hold him accountable? And in weekly talking to other people that are struggling in that thing, it's magical. It really, it's unbelievable to watch, where they start using these skills. And what you talked about, James, is they start using it, and all of a sudden they get, oh, it works. And then they come back. Yeah. It actually, whoa, I did. And what I try to do in the virtual micro training is we have a ton of participant-centered training. So it's not just me talking for an hour. I do a lot of talking here, but try to get them to do a lot of the asking them. So how did you implement this? What worked? What didn't work? And seeing that change, it really is fantastic to see.
Yeah.
One thing that I've been kind of interested in, my wife's involved in healthcare. So she's a chief pharmacy officer at a hospital system here in St. Louis area. And one of the things they have, it's a Catholic healthcare system. And so they have mission integration people. They have folks whose job is to do formation of new employees, formation of existing employees, to help them understand the sort of Catholic background, obviously, of the hospital system, what the values are, but not such that, you couldn't have, let's say, non-Catholics participating in the healthcare system. So, but it's a way for them to keep their mission aligned. And it sort of strikes me that a lot of what you're doing is somewhat similar to that. But I've always been struck by the mission integration and the amount of money that the Catholic healthcare systems tend to invest in that, versus what we see in, let's say, at least what I see in like non-denominational churches, or even denominations, where there just is this assumption that we're all going to stay on mission just by,
they fire hose. They're just fire hosing. right?
And so how would you, how do you think about that? How do you think about the significance of staying on mission in relation to leadership training and making sure that not only do we have a well-defined mission, but that we have the blocking and tackling necessary to stay on mission?
Oh yeah.
Does that make sense?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So I one thing is going back to drip irrigation.
Yeah.
It's fire hosing doesn't work, right?
Yeah.
We do it. It doesn't work.
It's a really great analogy, by the way.
Isn't
I didn't
it?
say it, but it's really fantastic.
Yeah, because I mean, and you sit there, and how many times have we seen it? Oh, let's train everybody on this, and let's all get aligned on this new. How about this one? The new book I read, and you get a CEO who reads a new book, and everybody has to align to the new book, and I got a whole stack of them.
Yeah,
yeah, I know. We've all done that one, right? And it's fire hose. It just doesn't work.
Yeah.
So in the goal level, which is the organizational leadership stuff, we talk about a power of alignment and how alignment. Can I tell you a quick story about alignment? So
Sure.
I was with the cell phone retailer, and we were bringing on a TV. I don't know if I can say it. We're bringing on Dish Network in all our retail stores. So I don't know if I'm allowed to say all these brand names, but anyway, so I have all these retail stores. I had 435 retail stores in the United States, and we're bringing on Dish Network in all these retail stores. And so how do you're selling a cell phone in a Verizon store, and you got to sell somebody, hold on, to transition into how they watch TV. How do you do that? Like, how do you actually do that? Right. And so what I did is I said, hold on, we have some really smart people working in our stores doing this for 8 hours, 10 hours a day. Let's ask them. And what we'll do is we'll put together a video contest, and you guys take your cell phone and film your own commercial or short training. And it could be a 3-minute video on how to transition from a cell phone to
cable provider.
Yeah, cable. It doesn't make sense. How do you do that? It doesn't make sense.
Right.
So we put out as a you guys design your own training. So we had 435 stores, and they and I think we had like 52 people putting training videos that they filmed on their own iPhone, and they filmed it and stuff like that. It was incredible. It was the best training that I think I've ever done, because I didn't do anything, which was really cool, right? Dumber I get, the smarter my people get, right? But they actually filmed their own commercial. And guess what? We had them view all the commercials to see which, or they're not commercials, but the small trainings. They were 3-minute trainings on which one they learned most. They were learning how to do it, by the way. And so then they voted to the top 10, and then we had the top 3, and then we had a reveal of the top one that won the award. And the president of the organization flew out to their store and took them all for lunch, the people who did the best small little training on it.
Oh, that's awesome.
Cool. Isn't that amazing training?
Yeah,
I mean, I thought this is the best training. I don't have to do anything. They're filming their own video on, and it was actually, they filmed it on their own iPhones, and it was amazing because it was in a store. It was just totally practical. It was the real thing. Here's the real story. The VP in charge of the entire organization, he wasn't being comped for selling Dish Network. Isn't that crazy? So the whole thing, we launched, we had actually people lined up in the store on launch day ready to buy Dish Network in all our 435 stores. The staff was jacked, training like crazy. It launched. And the power of alignment, the comp plan for the VP, he said, guys, don't push this. We're not really too. And I'm going, why? This is things like, from an L&D perspective, learning about, we're super excited about it. And crazy enough, he wasn't being paid on it. The whole thing went down the toilet. It was like the thing just died on the vine. So why would I tell you that stupid story?
Well, I mean, I think for a few different reasons. Number one, I mean, I love the idea of having the frontline people participate in the training. I think one of my most exciting moments as a consultant was when I had board of trustees, members of the boards of trustees, meeting with recruiters at one of the higher ed institutions that I was at. We met once every week. They were listening to the recruiters, understanding what they were saying, getting a deeper dive into admissions, and really not just sending things down by fiat, but actually understanding what the recruiters were dealing with. So that was super cool. Then I also think there's this idea of, when we think about alignment, you've got to have so many components aligned to make sure that it's not just, it's not just, hey, here's the culture and this is what we're going to do. The policies, the procedures, the infrastructure, all those things have to be aligned in order for anything to really work. Otherwise, you end up with gaps that can be mission critical.
And James, you nailed it. That's what it's the power of alignment.
Yeah.
And in the gold, we talk about the power of alignment. How you, with goal setting, often people set goals and they're not aligned with the organizational goal.
Yeah.
And if we're not alignment, and going back to drip training, we can set up. Actually, why don't people do drip training? Because it's so hard. The alignment is so hard.
Right.
It's so difficult.
Right.
The manifolds that we had to, and this is what my job was. I'm working, young kid out there in blazing heat in the negative desert, setting up manifolds and the tubes. It's a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of work. Why would we do that? Because the payoff long term, and we talked about this, the long term benefits, how I can actually do that, or the short term. Let's just fire hose everybody, and we did it. No alignment, no hard work. Right? It's all that alignment and hard work. And so going back to your original question, how do we actually tie all this together? It's the power of alignment, and it has to start at the top. And honestly, I've worked for organization after organization, and the senior leadership. Yeah, we do training, but they don't know what it is, and they don't care. Yeah, and so what I often do is get senior leaders come in, participate in the training, come part of it. I was with Angie's List. I had Angie Hicks show up at her training. She was in a virtual training. She did it with us. And talk about alignment, get the CEO of the organization in the training going, this is really valuable, guys, and making sure that everybody, we're all talking that same language, and we're all talking, and that the commonality of how we hold the people accountable, how we fill up before we pour out. Mm-hmm. And that filter downward, it's so powerful. And to talk about culture, and organizations talk about culture all day long, right? Yeah, culture is not what you say, it's what you do. Mm-hmm. So it's in that power of alignment. If we get everybody saying and doing the same thing, filling up before you pour out, right? The priority is not you, it's your team. How do you prioritize your team, right? And so, and how do you actually do that? And silver, we talk a little bit, and then the power of alignment is gold. And so these small virtual trainings that I'm looking at is covering all three of these that are really going to nail for a young, your new plumber is going to be working for you, Bob, how you're actually going to get him first off taking care of himself, and then it's about his team, and then how does he align, and all that process of alignment.
Yeah, I think anybody that hears this is going to be able to relate to it, because at some point in their life, and if it hasn't happened yet, it's going to happen, where they find themselves in a position that they don't really fully feel like they're prepared for. They kind of got the cart before the horse. Like in radio, me personally, there was times where, because my events experience, I would be in charge of a certain thing, and it's like there's people there that are under me that are way older than me, and that can be challenging, and that was intimidating, that was hard. But I think that's when I first started realizing the significance of modeling other people older than me and being mentored by people, and just taking a look at this, like knowing, all the personal growth that needs to happen, and, putting those pieces in there. So I think this is great. I think it's going to be awesome for everyone. And even if they don't feel like they can benefit from it, it just maybe hasn't happened to them yet, but you're going to find yourself in a situation where you're ill prepared, and you need to kind of go back and, add some lungs to the ladder that you skipped over. So
yeah, Nate, and I talk about skin knees, and I love to put my knees on this podcast. I have so many skin knees. You're falling face first in leadership, and oh man, it sucks. I don't know about you guys, but like mistakes you made, and you fall face first and you skin your knees, and you don't die, but boy, it's brutal, and we've all done it. So how do I learn from other people's skin knees? And that's what this is, right? Information is, we have Chat GPT. You can Chat GPT all this information. It's how do I apply it in my life so I don't skin my knees? And so I like to look at scenarios, and how do I walk through a scenario? A lot of the stuff we do is scenarios, and helping us really drive that.
Do you tend to use, again, this is something I've kind of found helpful, so I guess I'm picking your brain on improving my consulting practice, but one of the things I've done, I try to keep 3 or 4 different models and frameworks that I always use. Just finding something really simple.
Yep.
When I was in leadership as an academic dean, one of the things I used was Lencioni's 4 Obsessions of a CEO, right?
Yeah.
Right. And I didn't have everybody read the book. I just used those 4 obsessions, and I'm
Yeah.
like, well, I'm using this model, and this is what we're going to do. And so here's the way this looks, and I could lay that out and reinforce it with the teams I was leading without saying, hey, you need to go get this book and read it, and we're going to discuss it and
Yeah,
whatever.
in your
It's
spare
like,
time.
right. I could just take
Yeah.
that framework and say, no, this is how I'm going to do it. This is how I'm going to run the organization. I mean, failure of nerve, when I'm thinking about personal, internal feeding, failure of nerve by not Morgan Freeman, but by Friedman, is, I think, fantastic. I love that book, but
Yeah.
it's not one that I usually refer people to because it's really heavy. It's very detailed. It's not easy to get through. And so those are things that I use. But when I consult, I do try to give the organization certain frameworks for them to think through that are simple, really easy for them to implement and understand. They don't need all the theory behind it. They just need that, like, here's what it is, do this, and then let's revisit. If this doesn't work, and then here's this other framework I'll give you. Does that ring true to kind of how you operate?
So one of the things you're talking about is being a curator, and we think of a curator of a museum, and what a museum curator does goes off to all these artifacts and brings it to the marketplace and says, this actually piece is really important because if you go to a museum, this is why, and they give the background of why this particular piece of artifact was so interesting, right? That's what a curator does. And so we curate information to bring it to the marketplace. And so James, you're bang on there. And I look at the definition of intelligence is somebody that takes something very complicated and make it real simple. And so you're singing from the song sheet there. So one of the things that the frameworks that I love is people, purpose, process equals high performance.
Nice.
And we all want high performance. Any leader in any organization wants our people to perform high, right? And like, I don't know if you're a plumber or a sales guy, we all have performance matrix, and in this world of private equity firms, they all are increased by 20% over last year. I don't know about anybody else, but like, you wanted 20, we just busted our earlobes and made a huge gain last year. And now you want a 20% increase. Yeah. Okay. So how do you drive performance in an organization? And so people has to be the number one priority.
Yeah.
And are we training, mentoring, coaching, developing our people? One of the programs that I on Always Present we use is time management. How are we showing our people how to manage our time? And often we just assume they know how to do that.
Yeah.
It's one of the biggest gaps. So people, purpose. Do we really define what the purpose is? So going back to what we were talking about, alignment. Are we all aligned on drip irrigation? Are we all aligned on the goals and a directive? So people, and then what are the processes involved? And then last one, it equals high performance. If you try to supersede any of these ones earlier, like, I want high performance over my people, and we have all worked in that company, haven't we? I want high performance, but I don't care about you people, right?
Right.
That doesn't work. So really and do we have alignment with this? Are we really doubling down on developing our people? Do they know what the purpose is? And then do we have the processes to follow? And now we can expect high performance. And if you drive that high performance anywhere earlier in this equation, it just doesn't work. So James, to circle back to your question, one of the frameworks that I use is this one all the time. And how do we,
really great.
Okay, so what does it mean? Let's keep it real simple here, guys, because we got to understand what people, purpose, process equals high performance. We all want high performance, but we got to work the long game. And what is the long game? Is investing in our people. And one of the things is our leadership mastery program. We're going to put every leader through the leadership mastery program. It's just, they're strong, technically competent people, but we haven't trained them on the leadership skills. Let's give them those skills so they know how to fill up before they pour out. They know how to align their team, and they know what their priorities are. So how to actually do that. So that's long game.
Yeah, that's helpful. And I think it prompts another question, because, a lot of times, so when I was in higher education, I was over distance education. And so we were sort of a for-profit entity within a nonprofit entity. We weren't technically for-profit,
Yep.
but distance learning had to make enough money to help subsidize the parts of the institution that weren't working. So we were, every 8 weeks, we're worried about enrollment, worried about retention, we're worried about persistence. And when I frame it like that, worried, what I found was that created problem. That worry was a sign that I was putting performance over people, purpose, and process. And so what I had to try to do was cultivate a calmness within the org. I think this is why I gravitated to Failure of Nerve, that book, is because I needed to be the non-anxious present. I had to be the antidote to that anxiety. And if I was worried about the performance, then it was going to show. And so you had to create this sort of relaxed atmosphere where we're all sitting back and saying, what levers can we pull? And that was part of that process. Who can pull these levers? Do we have like all those kind of things? And then we're constantly pushing toward a purpose of, in that case, was educating students. And that would lead to higher performance. And so the whole model was constructed like that. But until I figured that part out, and I'm verbalizing it using your categories now, but I mean, until I figured that out, it was an anxious, high pressure. And it wasn't like there was no stress after I figured it out either, but it was far less. It ratcheted back so much, because now we're not worried. Like I used to say, like we can't really affect what the performance is actually going to be. There's too many variables there. Right. What we have to do is we have to hone in and just focus on our purpose, our processes, and our people. And if we can, I didn't say it like that again, but it's like, if you can get there, all that other stuff sort of, it's not like there's no stress, but there is a lot less anxiety, I think.
And it started at the top. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Do you find that, like, once people grasp that system and they actually, like,
what can
the
I actually
anxiety
do?
level in the organization just like
calm
deflates.
down. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So I grew up in Vancouver, and I spent a lot of time on boats, boating, and my first job was at a marina. So
Nice.
Boating was my whole life. I've been on boats where you actually go, the waves are so large, you start cresting over the top of a wave. When you hit the top of it, the white water is hitting the top of it, and you got your family on the boat. The last thing you're supposed to be doing as you're cresting the top of the wave, and if you go too much to the left or too much to the right, the wind will catch you and you'll throw you over. You right, and then you crest over the top, and then you go down the next one, and you actually put it in reverse to slow the motor down because the waves are so long. And then you got to hit the gas to go up the next one. Those are big waves.
Yeah.
And you got your family on the boat. Last thing you're supposed to be doing is turning your wife and your kids. I'm scared, guys. I don't know what I'm doing. Right? The last thing you should be doing as a president, I'm scared and worried. I don't know what's going to happen. No, right?
Yeah.
What are the practical things I can say? Guys, I know where the goal is. I know what the direction is. Let's go. And what you talked about, the calmness and some levers we can pull to drive that and really do that. In the Silver Leadership Mastery Program, we talk about the paradox of motivation. I can't change the motivation of my staff. Bob, who works for me, you're a plumber, you're Bob. I think we changed the name. I don't know if it was Bob or Fred. Okay, so but I can't affect Bob's motivation. The reality is he motivated to be a plumber or not? You can't do it. I can't get him more excited about his job than he's willing to. So what is the paradox of motivation? But how can I create the environment so Bob is highly motivated to be the best plumber he can? And so we talk about driving motivation. How do we actually do that? And it starts with us, right? The calmness and the goal and the direction, and am I full and am I centered and ready to go? And going back to bronze, am I full before I pour out? And creating that environment of the calmness and the centered. And I'm on the boat and I'm going up the top of that wave, and I know that we're going to get through this storm. And on their side, there's safe harbor, and I'm going to get my team there. And that's part of leadership, right? That's what we need, that courage. And if I'm honest with you, it's really hard. And as brothers, having people around us to say, guys, I'm on the boat and I'm really scared right now. This is hard stuff. I got pressures galore. My dad had a heater manufacturer in Mississauga, Ontario, and he passed away. I was 26 years old, and he had a heart attack. We were watching a Super Bowl together, and I took over the company. So the 26 years old, I'm a president of a heater company. It's stupid, right? And I remember on my knees crying out to the Lord, 26 years old, God, I can't do this. Like, how do I do this? It's scary. And luckily I had mentors and coaches and friends that held me in that time, and brothers that said, hold on, we can do this, Brock. And I didn't turn to my kids, I didn't turn to my wife or the colleagues or the employees saying I'm scared, but having those, and Nate, we talk mentor all the time. How do we turn to men of faith, men that hold us and can say, hey, I need help today. I'm scared. So it's powerful stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting to think about this. I mean, maybe we can pivot the conversation here. Nate had mentioned that we do a lot on discipleship, and there are a lot of commonalities between discipleship and mentoring, although they're not, discipleship isn't as organizational as sort of leadership training and those kind of things. But it just strikes me that maybe we don't quite understand as a people of God what our purpose actually is. And because we don't have that purpose, we can't develop the processes. At least not a full range of those processes. I think that's sort of one
James,
of the things.
we know what it is. We know, get people in the front door.
Yeah.
That's it, right?
Exactly. I mean,
just get people, invite your friends and neighbors. Don't worry about the back door. It's huge. And there are like 8 of them, and they're leaving faster. You're going to shake a stick. Just get them in the front door. And that's our purpose.
Yeah.
That's the purpose for the church. Get them in the front door, and the pastor will take care of everything else.
It's a scary thought.
It is. It's really wrong. It is. Yeah. It is. It's just, so go back to playing the guitar. It's not an 8-hour lesson or a 4-hour sermon of playing the guitar. It's drip irrigation over a period of time. Discipleship. It's the long game. How can I mentor and coach over, and how do I do life? How do I be a better husband? How do I work really hard and then come home and be always present with my kids? How do I always, and that's what we named we named our company Always Present, because I want to be always present in this conversation with you guys. My cell phone's not going off. I'm worried about, no, how can I always be present in every conversation? And that in discipling and mentoring on the long game, because that's what we're about, right? And James, you're bang on. The church, I think we've lost that focus. It's not about getting people in the front door. It's about how do we develop a relationship for long-term mentoring and coaching, that I'm with you on how to do life.
Yeah. And I think I teach a leadership course for Wheaton College, and one of the ways that I describe leadership in there is that it is just a specialized form of discipleship.
Yeah.
And so there's part of me that wonders if we haven't inverted that in the church to some degree, that we're actually looking for leaders. We're not looking for disciples. And it's not that we've had a really great conversation about leadership. And I think in organizations all across the planet, right, leadership is crucial, like 100%. I don't want to discount it. But within the church, leadership has to be tempered by discipleship. It has to be shaped by it. Otherwise, you're going to lead people into something that looks less like conformity to Jesus Christ and more like conformity to your particular vision of what this organization should look like. And so it just feels to me like we've sometimes, I'm going to be too broad brush about that, but I do think sometimes we've inverted those two. We've said, let's get a leader who can drive discipleship. But really what we need is a disciple who understands how to lead through discipleship.
Yeah. Something you said, Brock, that really stuck with me, that stood out to me, was you said culture is not driven by what we say, it's by what we do. And anybody that's ever spoken to my life that has been significant and like for a long period of time, it's not just the words they say, it's how they show up. I'm watching how they interact, if they practice what they preach, all those kinds of things. So I think that's awesome. And James, what you were just saying, I was sitting here thinking, like, if you took 100 churches in America right now and asked them what discipleship was, you're going to get probably a different definition on across the board on all 100. And it's really not that complicated, like you're saying with leadership. And I think there's so much. When we first started talking about doing this, I was like, it's not just ministry, but there's ministry in all of it because it's all people
Yeah.
and God is using on both sides. And so, but yeah, that was right on. That really stuck out to me. And I think it will to our listeners too.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and I think the essence is that it's not, we always want to scale this, right? The North American church, let's scale it bigger.
Yeah.
And as
Yeah.
soon as we start scaling, we lose intimacy. And this is where always present, we have small virtual classrooms, 8 to 10 people, small. I don't want to get this thing big. Literally, we want to have small virtual classrooms where we have that intimacy, where we can share
Yeah.
one-on-one, the long game. How do I connect and teach you the skills, the skin knees that I've gone through that that hurt, and how can you avoid those in your life? Because boy, it sucks falling face first. But that as soon as we start scaling that up, we lose all intimacy, and it just doesn't work, does it? So it's all about small scale stuff.
And that's very
It's
similar to
so
what you're doing with your Bible study, James. The guys in Virginia, at some point, there's more impact there, or different impact than maybe you would get even from doing a show like this. That's going to go out there to way more people. It's just different because of that intimacy, like you're saying, Brock. I hear him talk all the time about his Bible study, and I got to sit in on one of them. But I think that's the model that God laid out for us over and over again, and we just churches, especially like you're saying. I seen something so funny the other day. It was like it's all about Jesus, but then it was like also mega church pastors, and then the pastor's got wires on him, and he like goes out into the crowd and is doing all this stuff, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, if that wasn't like the most accurate depiction of like big churches in America right now. It's just, I think we've kind of lost that, and we got to come back to the small, intimate. And I remember you saying that even when I first met you, Brock, like, we don't need to make this big, our mentorship, it needs to be powerful, but coming from an evangelical world like I have, you have to really take that out of your mind because it's always there. Like you have to have something big, but it doesn't need to be more than a few people sometimes.
Yeah.
But I would say it's interesting because I just did a video yesterday on 1 Corinthians 9 and Paul's statement that he is seeking to be all things to all people that he might save some. And so it's not like I'm against mass media. I mean, we're doing a podcast here. It's going to go out to a lot of people. But the reality is that if we're not careful in settings like this, we can't avoid not being all things to all people when we're doing it like this, when we're doing it mass audience. And so I think part of what you're talking about, Brock, is like that small setting allows you to adapt to the people you're working with, to say that incisive thing, right? It becomes surgery as opposed to blunt force trauma or something like that. You know what I mean? Like it's an incision, it's not a hammer. And I think a lot of times what we've defaulted to is we've said, no, let's just use the hammer. Let's get as big and as broad as possible and be as general and generic as possible and say, platitudes and things like that. But at the end of the day, the real work and the harder work, I think, is in the concrete situations where we find people.
Yes.
And it's just not the sort of work that a lot of times people are willing to support. It doesn't have the sizzle that, reaching millions of people does.
Sure.
The reality is it can be just as powerful, if not more, if done correctly.
Yeah. It's
so,
if people like employees, and they can tell this, is you have a leader who is authentic and cares, or is he doing this, like you said, the sledgehammer or fire hose?
Right.
Like how do, like, really in one of the trainings we do is, so you have an employee and Bob works in a warehouse for you, and he unloads all the trucks so you could feed your assembly line. Bob's a star employee, never misses a day, solid, warehouse is running great. All of a sudden he starts showing up late, and the production line is running short, and then you call Bob in the office, what's going on? And he tells you his wife Carol has cancer. What do you do? How do you manage that as a leader? And these are the real world things that
Mhm.
your employee. What do you do with Bob,
right.
who's one of your employees, and his wife Carol has cancer? What do you do?
That's right.
How do you hold them accountable? As a boss, I have a production line with 15 people in it, and if Bob
Right.
doesn't show up at 7 a.m. to unload the trucks, my production
Everything's
line
behind.
stops, and 17
Yeah.
people and I go out of business.
Mhm.
How do I have that conversation with
Yeah.
Bob and sit down with him? And it goes back to what you're talking about, James, authentic. How can I have an authentic, caring conversation with Bob and have empathy and understand and have a heart for him, but at the same time, hold him accountable that, Bob,
Right.
you got to be here. And just because
Yeah.
your wife has cancer, it's horrible. And I know, but I need those trucks unloaded. How do
Yeah.
you actually walk through that?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And
that-
authentically.
yeah. And there's no real way to genericize that.
No, it's a
Right.
it's a
Right.
heartbeat,
Yeah.
care,
Mhm.
love, respect.
Yeah.
But it's also laying out expectations.
Yeah.
Here's the expectations. Here's what we agreed to ahead of time, Bob. And can you meet those or not in a difficult situation you're at? And walking through and if you haven't laid out the expectations, Bob going, well, I'm doing a great job and I've done a great job and they don't really care.
Yeah.
Well, whoa, right. So this goes back to the church. Do we have laid out expectations for what discipleship is, what mentorship is? Have we
Mhm.
laid that out? And I don't think we have. Clearly define what the expectations are, and then coach through the bottlenecks, mentor
Yeah.
through the bottlenecks.
Yeah, we talk about that all the time. Like that's why we really want to focus on true discipleship and helping churches, because every church thinks that they're doing a good job at it, but most of the time they're not, you know? So I guess it's just the filter that you look through. But always present Institute, your open enrollment right now for the bronze level starts in October, right? Is there anything else that you want to
Check out my
share?
website. Actually, we're launching today. I've kind of pushed off my launching on LinkedIn. So today is actually my launch day. And so
Okay,
I'm really
awesome.
excited. Yeah. So we're launching on LinkedIn. If you know anybody that wants to go through leadership training or they were a really good plumber and they want to step into leadership, again, I'm not marketing to HR, to the training departments. I'm actually going directly to the supervisors, managers, team leads who are in that role and saying, convince my boss with a piece of, they actually on my website, it says convince my boss, and go convince my boss and say, I need leadership training. I'm a great plumber, but I need to lead my people. And the whole goal for this is to get 10 people, do a small group of bronze, silver, and gold starting October. And that's our launch date. And I've done this in another life in a former high-tech firm, and it was magical to see the transform lives of those leaders, that their lives changed. And the way they led, it was like Matrix, the red pill and the blue pill. It literally, it gave everybody a red pill. They couldn't lead. It changed everything in their lives because they, again, the small drip and really understand how to have that empathy for Bob and Carol, how to actually do that, have those really hard conversations that you care and you lead, because it's not about a paintbrush. It's not about hammering people and fire hosing. It's really having that heart of compassion and care and love for people.
That's awesome.
Cool.
I appreciate your heart and thanks for sharing all that, and excited for you for your launch.
Yeah.
Hope you have much success. It's
I'd
great.
love to come back. I'll let you know in the middle how's it going and introduce you to some of my
100%.
students. And did their lives change? And that's what's right. Do we see transformation? And that's what it's about, right? Leading
Absolutely.
with effectiveness.
That's awesome.
Very cool, man. I love the approach. I love the work, and I love the ministry. So thanks for being here. Thanks for sharing this with us. It's awesome to have you. It's great to meet you.
Yeah, it's great meeting you guys. Thank you very much for your time, guys. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Brock.
Yeah, good luck there, guys.
All right, everybody. Well, take care, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Thinking Christian.